AITA for refusing to help my neighbor's dying son? You know how every neighborhood has its feel? Like, some places are all hustle and bustle, people coming and going, cars zooming past, no one really stopping to say hi. But my little suburban pocket of the world is the opposite of that. I've lived here for 6 years. Not a huge amount of time, but long enough to have put down roots. It's the kind of neighborhood where people still wave at each other, where the mailman knows your dog's name, and where Christmas decorations start going up the second Halloween ends. We have block parties twice a year, one in the summer with potlucks and bounce houses, and one in the winter where we light up the street like a Hallmark movie. There's a Saturday morning dog walking group that snakes down the sidewalks like some adorable parade. Parents stand at the ends of driveways chatting while their kids ride bikes in the cul-de-sac. It's nice, predictable, safe. And for most of those 6 years, I've lived quietly. I'm not a recluse or anything. I mow my lawn on the weekends. I wave to the neighbors. I've lent out the occasional power drill or cup of sugar. People know me. Mike, the guy with the navy blue house and the giant golden retriever who loves belly rubs. But I'm not exactly the center of attention either. I like my peace. I work from home, graphic design, and I don't have kids, which makes me a bit of an outlier around here. Most of my neighbors are families, couples with 2.5 kids, dogs, minivans. Still, I've always tried to be a good neighbor, which brings me to Mark. Mark lives right next door. He moved in about a year after I did, mid-40s, a little scruffy but solid guy. Divorced, I think, though we never really talked much about it. What stood out most about him wasn't Mark himself, but his son, Ethan. Ethan is 10 now, and probably one of the brightest, sweetest kids I've ever met. The kind of kid who waves at everyone, always has some weird science fact ready to share, and once helped me chase my dog down the street when she got loose. But about a year ago, Ethan got sick. Really sick. At first, I thought it was just a cold that wouldn't go away. Then it was missed school days. Then I started noticing the medical transport van pulling up in front of their house. Eventually, word got around, Ethan had been diagnosed with a rare immune disorder. One of those things you only ever hear about on medical dramas or the sad part of a GoFundMe post. And speaking of that, the neighborhood rallied. It was actually kind of amazing. People set up meal trains, organized fundraisers, donated money. There was a GoFundMe that raised nearly $30,000 in the first few weeks. Mark had to quit his job to care for Ethan full-time, and everyone pitched in however they could. I did my part, too. Donated a good chunk to the fund. Spent a couple weekends helping some neighbors build a ramp for their front door so Ethan could get inside more easily in his wheelchair. Drove them to the hospital once when their old sedan broke down. Little things, really nothing heroic. Just what you'd hope someone would do for you if the roles were reversed. But a few weeks ago, everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon. Hot, sticky. The kind of day where even the breeze feels like a hair dryer in your face. I was in my garage, trying to fix the loose panel on my lawnmower, when I heard footsteps coming up the driveway. I looked up, wiping grease from my hands, and saw Mark. He looked tired. Not just long day tired, like worn down by life tired. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble creeping in, shirt rumpled like he'd slept in it. "Hey, Mike," he said, voice low. "You got a minute?" "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" He glanced around, like he didn't want anyone to hear. "Can we talk inside?" Now, let me just pause here and say that never happens in my neighborhood. People chat on sidewalks, over fences, standing on lawns with beers in hand. You don't ask to go inside unless it's serious. So yeah, my radar pinged immediately. I led him into my kitchen, offered him a water, and we sat down at the island. My dog, Maple, curled up by my feet, sensing the tension. Mark didn't waste time. "I need a favor," he said. I nodded slowly. "Okay, what kind of favor?" He looked at me, dead in the eyes. "A big one." Turns out, big was an understatement. Mark explained, haltingly at first, that Ethan's condition had worsened. The treatments were no longer working, and the doctors were trying to get him into a specialized program across the country. Problem was, it was out of network. Insurance wasn't going to cover it. The program required a 6-month commitment. They'd need to temporarily relocate, and they couldn't afford it. Not even close. He paused, clearly struggling, then said something that made my stomach knot. I need someone to watch the house, and to take care of some things while I'm gone. I frowned. Of course. You mean like, bring in the mail, water the plants? He hesitated. Not exactly. Then he pulled out an envelope. Inside was a set of documents, legal-looking, lots of tiny print, and a single-page letter handwritten by Mark. The gist? He wanted me to temporarily assume power of attorney for him while he was gone. I just stared at him. Dude, I finally said, that's a lot. I know, he said quickly. I wouldn't be asking if I had anyone else. I trust you, and Ethan, he adores you. You're the only one he talks about besides me. Please, Mike, just until we get back. I didn't know what to say. Power of attorney? That's not watch my plants while I'm gone. That's manage my life in my absence. Finances, decisions, even medical stuff if something went wrong. Mark, man, are you sure this is the only option? He nodded. I've asked everyone I can think of. My parents are gone. My ex, she's not in the picture anymore. Friends moved away. You're the only person I know who's stable, who's here, and who's decent. I was floored, flattered, but also freaked out. I told him I needed time to think. He said he understood. He left the envelope with me and walked back to his house. And that was the moment everything started unraveling. For the next couple days, I didn't sleep much. I read through the documents, Googled the legal terms, talked to a lawyer friend, without giving names. Every time I thought about saying yes, I imagined worst-case scenarios, identity theft, financial disasters, him disappearing and leaving me holding the bag. But every time I thought about saying no, I pictured Ethan. Pale, fragile, hooked up to machines, trusting me. Eventually, I agreed. With conditions. I told Mark I'd sign temporarily with an expiration date and with boundaries. No selling assets, no making major financial moves without checking in. Just covering bills, keeping the house running, handling day-to-day stuff. He was beyond grateful. Hugged me, nearly cried. That weekend, he and Ethan left. I helped them load up the car, watched them drive off. And then I was alone next door to a house I now technically had some control over. That's when I found the first red flag. It started with the mail. I noticed a few letters marked urgent from a bank I didn't recognize. I brought them in, figuring I'd just forward them or stash them for Mark. But one was already half open, like it had been ripped then tucked back together. Inside, a warning of foreclosure proceedings. Apparently, Mark hadn't paid the mortgage in 4 months. I double-checked the documents he gave me. Nowhere had he mentioned that the house was on the verge of being taken. I tried calling him. No answer. Texted. No reply. I left a voicemail. 2 days passed. Then I got a message back. Short and vague. Don't worry. It's being handled. But it didn't feel handled. It felt like I was stepping onto a rotting floorboard and hearing it creak beneath me. I didn't want to snoop, but I had legal access now. So I did. And what I found in that house started peeling away everything I thought I knew about Mark. After my neighbor Mark left town with his son Ethan for a 6-month medical program, I agreed hesitantly to hold temporary power of attorney. It was supposed to be simple. Manage a few bills, keep the lights on, water the lawn, forward mail. But then I discovered Mark hadn't paid his mortgage in 4 months. And he never told me. I tried contacting him, but he ghosted me for days, eventually sending one cryptic text. Don't worry, it's being handled. Handled how, though? The sense of unease crept in fast. The more I poked around the house. Legally, mind you, as someone with POA, the more things didn't add up. Unopened letters from debt collectors. Prescription bottles with different names. A spare phone hidden in a sock drawer. But all of that pales in comparison to what happened next. Because one evening, about 3 weeks after Mark left town, he called me out of the blue. Not to talk about the house. Not to update me on Ethan. But to ask me for something much more personal. It was a Tuesday, late, just past 9:30 p.m. I was on the couch with a blanket and a cold beer, watching reruns of The Office, trying to forget the growing list of problems that came with being Mark's trusted neighbor. My phone buzzed. Mark, hey, got a sec to talk? I sighed. Sure, call me. He called almost immediately. His voice was quieter than usual. Not in a bad way, more careful. Like someone walking across thin ice. Hey Mike, I hate to do this to you, but I wanted to ask something. And you're totally allowed to say no. Seriously, that's always a bad sign. When someone pre-apologizes and frames it like that, you know something heavy is coming. I braced myself. What's up? He hesitated, then said it in one breath, like he was afraid of scaring me off. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to get tested as a bone marrow donor. For Ethan. I was stunned. Not just surprised, stunned. Took me a second to find words. Wait, what? You mean like now? Yeah, he said. They're starting to screen potential donors. We've hit a wall with matches. And since you're, healthy and close, I thought maybe. I'm not family. I cut in gently. I know, but there's a chance. They said even unrelated donors have made it through. I paused. He was being calm, respectful. No pressure in his voice. No pleading. Just tired hope. But inside, my stomach dropped. See, what Mark didn't know, what nobody in the neighborhood knows, is that I have a complicated medical history. I've been living with an autoimmune condition for over a decade. It's manageable now, thanks to treatment and some lifestyle changes. But it's left scars, physically, mentally, emotionally. Hospitalizations. Years of trial and error. The feeling of your own body turning against you. I don't talk about it. Ever. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I just don't want to relive it. And frankly, I don't owe anyone those details. So in that moment, I had to draw a line. I took a breath and said, I'm really sorry, man, but I'm not comfortable going through with that. Silence. Not the sharp, awkward kind. Just a pause. Like he was processing. Then he said, okay, thanks anyway. And that was it. No argument. No passive-aggressive comments. He hung up a few minutes later after some small talk. I went to bed relieved. That relief lasted less than 12 hours. The next morning, everything felt different. Started small. I stepped outside to bring my trash bins back from the curb. Normally, this would involve at least 2 or 3 neighborly waves. A nod from old Mrs. Kerrigan across the street. Maybe a quick, hey Mike, from one of the dads pushing a stroller. But this time, nothing. I saw them. They saw me, and they looked away. Mrs. Kerrigan turned and shut her blinds. Jeff, the guy 2 houses down, looked right at me, and then walked back inside without a word. Weird. Maybe it was just a weird day? I shrugged it off. People have off days, right? But then I checked my mailbox, and inside, no envelope, no postage, was a note, folded in half. 1 sentence. No name. You selfish coward. Hope you sleep well. My heart dropped. I stood there, just staring at it. Then I looked up, half expecting someone to be watching from a window, but no one was in sight. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down at the kitchen table. How the hell? And then it clicked. Mark. He must have told someone. Maybe he vented to another neighbor. Maybe he mentioned it casually. Or maybe he was angry at my refusal and decided to frame it in a certain light. He said no. Wouldn't even get tested. Didn't even try to help Ethan. And like wildfire, that version of the story spread. By the end of that week, I was a pariah. Neighbors I'd known for 6 years. People I'd built ramps with, shared drinks with at block parties. Suddenly had nothing to say. No waves. No greetings. Just closed doors and cold shoulders. Someone posted anonymously in our neighborhood Facebook group, talking about how some people pretend to care until it actually matters. The comments were full of vague responses, but enough people knew who it was aimed at. I even saw one reply, he didn't even try to be a match. Who does that? I could have spoken up. I could have defended myself. I could have said, I'm dealing with my own health problems. I've spent years in hospitals. I can't risk going through that again. Not for a test, not for anyone. But I didn't, because what would that accomplish? Would they believe me? Or would they think I was making excuses? I stayed quiet, but the damage was done. Then it got worse. One evening I found tire marks on my lawn. Fresh, deep ones, like someone had spun out. A trash bag was left on my porch, filled with what I can only describe as waste. Literal garbage. A kid, one of the teenagers from the corner house, yelled, "Baby killer," at me while biking past. And through it all, Mark said nothing. I texted him calmly, asking if he had talked to anyone about our conversation. He replied, "I just said you declined. That's it. No apology. No clarification. Just that." I was stunned. He had watched the entire neighborhood ostracize me for a deeply personal decision, and he didn't lift a finger to set the record straight. The irony? I'd given him power of attorney to help him. I was managing his bills, talking to the bank, trying to figure out what the hell to do about the impending foreclosure. And this is how he repaid me? By letting me become the villain in some unspoken neighborhood morality play. I was livid, but more than that, I was hurt, because I had spent years being the kind of neighbor who helped without asking anything in return. The guy who gave generously, who stayed out of drama, who kept his head down and his heart open. And one decision, one private, medical, reasonable decision, had flipped my entire life upside down. I wish I could say this is where it ended, but something even stranger happened next. I started getting letters from lawyers. Apparently, someone had submitted a complaint about inappropriate use of power of attorney. The bank had been contacted by an anonymous source claiming I was mismanaging Mark's assets while he was away. It was clear. Someone was trying to get me removed, and I had a horrible, gut-churning feeling I knew exactly who it was. If you're just catching up, let me give you the shortest recap I can. I live in a suburban neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. Block parties, holiday lawn wars, the whole deal. Quiet, friendly, harmless, until it wasn't. My neighbor Mark, a single dad with a sick son named Ethan, asked me for a massive favor before leaving town for an experimental medical program. Temporary power of attorney, just for bills and basic responsibilities. Nothing crazy. I agreed. Then everything started to unravel. I discovered foreclosure notices, hidden debt, ghosted texts, cryptic answers, and then weeks later, Mark dropped a bomb. He asked me to get tested as a bone marrow donor for Ethan. What he didn't know, and what I didn't tell him, is that I have a long, traumatic history with my own autoimmune illness. The kind that involved years of medications, hospitalizations, even near-death experiences. The kind of thing that makes invasive medical testing dangerous for me. So I said no, politely, respectfully, privately, and for 12 hours I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong, because the next day the neighborhood turned on me. It started subtly. People stopped waving, stopped making eye contact. Conversations went quiet when I walked up. Then came the anonymous note in my mailbox calling me a selfish coward. Then tire tracks on my lawn, trash on my porch. A teenager screamed, "Baby killer," while riding his bike past my house. And then came the final blow. I was removed from the neighborhood group chat. Now listen, I know that sounds stupid, but if you live in a tight-knit community, you get it. The group chat is the lifeline. It's where lost dogs get found, BBQs get planned, emergency plumber recommendations are shared, and I was kicked out without a word. A friend forwarded me screenshots. That's how I saw the post. Some anonymous user, G, I wonder who, wrote this on Nextdoor. Imagine being the one person who could potentially save a dying 10-year-old and saying no. That's who we're living next to. They didn't name me. They didn't have to. Within a day, people I barely knew were emailing me, demanding me on Facebook, leaving voicemails. Please reconsider. You were always so kind. This doesn't seem like you. I hope you never need help in your life. And here's the part that broke me. I started to believe them. For a few days, I spiraled hard. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I should have just told Mark the truth. That I couldn't be a donor because I was already sick. That even getting tested could trigger something in my body that I might not recover from. But the thing is, when you've spent your life trying to hide your pain, trying to not be a burden, The idea of explaining it all just to justify not doing something feels like betrayal, like you're bartering your trauma for permission to have boundaries. So I stayed quiet, ashamed, angry, hurt. I stopped walking my dog during daylight hours. I stopped opening the group Facebook page. I ate in silence, flinching at every knock on the door. And then, something changed. It happened 2 days later. I was sitting at my desk, checking Mark's utility bill account, because yes, I was still handling his crap through all of this, when I got a text from a neighbor I hadn't heard from in weeks. "Katie, you need to check the neighborhood group. Right now." I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. And right there at the top of the thread, a massive post. Not by me, not by Mark, by Tanya, a woman who lives 4 doors down. Super sweet, PDA mom, makes killer lemon bars. Her husband once helped me fix a storm drain. The post began like this: "I'm posting this because I think the truth matters, even when it's uncomfortable." She went on to explain that she had recently volunteered at a hospital fundraiser for the same program Ethan was enrolled in. And at that fundraiser, she'd spoken to a social worker who recognized Ethan's name. Not just Ethan, but Mark. According to the social worker, Mark was not even Ethan's legal guardian anymore. I read that line 3 times like my brain refused to absorb it. But there was more. Turns out, Child Protective Services had been involved. The details were limited, and Tanya was careful not to speculate. But the facts were, Mark had lost custody of Ethan months ago. Ethan was now in the care of a state-appointed guardian. The medical program had accepted Ethan under state supervision, not parental consent. And Mark? He wasn't with Ethan. He had never gone with him. He had been lying. All of it, the road trip, the relocation, the hospital visits, was a lie. He had left town, sure, but not for Ethan. No one knew where he actually was. Suddenly, all the red flags I'd ignored slammed together in my mind like a wreck. The foreclosure notices, the ghosting, the missing documents, the second phone, the way he quietly slipped out of sight once he'd handed me POA. And now, he'd manipulated an entire community into turning on me. Why? I didn't know yet, but I was done staying quiet. I posted a statement in the group that night. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. I explained I had accepted POA reluctantly, that I had tried to help, that I declined to be tested for deeply personal medical reasons I did not owe anyone. I said I'd stayed quiet out of respect, but that staying quiet had become dangerous. And I thanked Tanya for standing up. The comments exploded. People apologized. People DM'd me to ask if I was okay. People began to question everything Mark had told them. And within 48 hours, the same people who had shunned me were now digging into his past. What they found? Well, let's just say the real story behind Mark and Ethan was about to come out. And it was darker than any of us expected. By this point, my life had become something between a bad Lifetime movie and a social experiment gone wrong. If you followed the first 3 parts of this story, you know the basics. My neighbor Mark, single dad, sick son Ethan, asked me to take over power of attorney while he went out of town for a medical program. I agreed, thinking I was just helping someone in crisis. Then came the strange bills, the foreclosure notices, the silence. Then came Mark's ask. Would I consider getting tested as a bone marrow donor for Ethan? I said no, for personal, deeply private reasons. I live with an autoimmune condition I don't talk about. The idea of going through that kind of testing was not only painful, it could have been dangerous for me. But I didn't explain all that. I shouldn't have needed to. Still, Mark told someone. And that someone told everyone. And suddenly, my entire neighborhood turned against me. People called me a coward, a monster, a man who refused to help a dying child. Then, just when I started to believe maybe I was the villain, the truth began to unravel. It started with a neighbor uncovering that Mark didn't even have custody of Ethan anymore. That Ethan was under state guardianship. That Mark wasn't with him at all. But even that bombshell, that wasn't the end. Because a few days later, the biggest truth drop of all came from the last place I expected. An anonymous post on the neighborhood forum popped up one evening around 8:15 p.m. I was sitting in my living room, trying not to look at my phone, trying not to refresh the group thread, when I got a text from Katie again. Katie, holy sh*T. Did you see what just got posted? I opened the app. There it was, a post with no name, no profile photo, just the word anonymous and a caption that read, I work at the Children's Hospital, and you all deserve the truth. Started off simple, direct, clinical, even, just so you all know, no one on this street, including the person you're all bullying, was ever a match for Ethan. There was never a donor request made through official channels. His case was handled through state services, not parental volunteers. You're being emotionally manipulated. That was the post. No fluff, no hashtags, no angry rants, just cold, hard truth. And it hit like a nuke. The replies came instantly. Dozens of neighbors commented in real time. Questions, confusion, disbelief. Wait, what do you mean no request was made? Are you saying Mark lied about the bone marrow stuff? This can't be real, can it? But then came confirmation. One user, a parent of a child who had been at the same hospital, chimed in with this, I just called a friend who works in admin there. They confirmed it. There was no outreach for community donor matches. The kid is in foster care. Mark hasn't been involved for months. Then another comment. I called the number on the GoFundMe page. The hospital says they've never received any direct donations from that fund. Boom. In less than 30 minutes, every lie Mark had told started to implode. It was all fake. The part where I was supposedly a match? Made up. The part where I refused to help? Manufactured. Mark had fabricated that story. My supposed refusal to save Ethan's life, just to guilt the neighborhood into doubling down on sympathy and donations. And the GoFundMe? Oh yeah, that became the next nuclear blast. It had raised tens of thousands of dollars. Multiple neighbors had posted screenshots showing their $500, $1,000, even $2,000 donations. People had organized bake sales, raffles, silent auctions. Where had the money gone? Not to the hospital. Not to Ethan. Someone had traced the linked bank account. It belonged to a private personal account under Mark's name. A fraud complaint was filed. Then another. Then a third. By the next morning, the GoFundMe had been frozen, pending investigation. The fallout? Imagine the most cheerful, suburban, potluck-loving neighborhood you can think of. Now imagine it collectively waking up and realizing it had been conned by the one guy everyone trusted the most. It was pandemonium. The same group chat that once called me selfish, now it was blowing up with apologies. I got a private message from Jeff, the same guy who ignored me for 2 weeks. I can't believe what we did to you. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of it. The woman who left the coward note in my mailbox? She showed up at my door with cookies and tears in her eyes. I didn't let her in, but I accepted the apology. Even the teenager who screamed, "Baby killer," at me left a handwritten note. I was being dumb. My mom told me the truth. I'm sorry. Should have felt good. Vindicating. But it didn't. Felt hollow. Because the damage had already been done. You know the saying, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes? Yeah. That was my life now. For weeks, I'd been harassed, alienated, judged. All based on a lie told by someone who vanished the second things got complicated. I'd lost sleep, questioned my own character, wondered if I should have given up my medical privacy just to defend myself. And the whole time, Mark had been using me as a scapegoat, a villain, a distraction. So no, I wasn't celebrating, but I was angry because it wasn't just me. It was Ethan. Here's the part that hurts the most. All of this, the sympathy grifts, the lies, the manipulation, had been built on the back of a child's suffering. Ethan is sick. He does need care. He does need people around him who care about his health, his life, his future. And instead, his father used that suffering to prop up a con. I later found out Mark had been staying in a cheap rental town over, using fake names on DoorDash, siphoning donation money into prepaid accounts. When authorities finally caught up to him, he was brought in for questioning. I don't know the full charges yet. Fraud? Probably. maybe child endangerment, maybe identity theft, depending on how deep this goes. But here's what I do know. Mark is never coming back to this neighborhood. And no one, not even the people who once idolized him, wants him to. As for me, the power of attorney has been legally terminated. I've handed everything over to Ethan's state guardian and a family attorney assigned by the hospital. I'm no longer responsible for the bills, the house, or any of the mess Mark left behind. But I'm still picking up the pieces of my own life. Trust is a strange thing. It can take years to build and minutes to shatter. And even though my name is cleared, the wounds are still there. I walk the dog again now during daylight. I wave at neighbors when they wave first. The invitations to the next block party are already being sent out. Will I go? I don't know. But I do know one thing. When people show you who they really are, believe them. And when people turn on you without ever asking your side of the story, believe that too. It's strange the way people can flip. One day, they're ignoring you, whispering behind your back, calling you selfish, slipping cruel little notes into your mailbox. And the next, they're waving again, smiling, pretending nothing ever happened. After the anonymous nurse posted the truth about the bone marrow request, and after the GoFundMe fraud investigation went public, the entire neighborhood shifted like a flock of birds changing direction in the sky. People who hadn't looked me in the eye in weeks were now acting like old friends. One guy even brought over beer as an apology. A couple of the moms came by with banana bread and awkward explanations, the kind that begin with, "We didn't know," and end with, "You have to understand, it was about a child." I smiled. I nodded. I told them I appreciated the gesture, but I didn't forget. I remembered every face that turned away, every message that questioned my character, every stone cast without even asking for my side of the story. And I especially remembered the man who started it all. Mark. He vanished overnight. Literally. One day, I noticed the blinds in his house were shut. The next morning, the driveway was empty. The curtains were gone. Front porch light off. Mailbox cleared. I peeked through the window. Completely empty. No note. No message. No goodbye. Just gone. At first, I thought he was arrested. Maybe the fraud charges had finally caught up to him. But then I got a message from someone who had worked with him years ago. Someone who had seen my story floating around online and recognized his face. What they told me, that was the final twist I never saw coming. Mark, or rather, the man we all knew as Mark, wasn't even Ethan's real father. That part took a moment to settle in. Everything had been based on the assumption that this man was a single dad doing his best for a sick kid. But he wasn't. He had posed as a caregiver, used temporary guardianship paperwork to gain access to Ethan's benefits, positioned himself as a loving father figure, all to exploit sympathy and rake in donations. That's why the custody had been revoked months ago. That's why he didn't go with Ethan to the medical program. That's why he needed me to hold power of attorney. He was already setting up his escape plan. And all the while, he was spinning this web of lies so tight that when I said one word, no, the entire neighborhood turned against me without question, because he had conditioned them to see him as the hero, and me as the selfish side character who didn't play along. But here's the one good thing that came out of it all. Ethan is real. He's not a fake name, not some made-up child used to scam people. He's an actual kid, and he's okay. After child services got involved, they located extended family, actual relatives who had been trying to find him. He's now in their care. From what I've been told, he's safe, going to school, and receiving real medical attention through legitimate programs. Not back-alley fundraising schemes run by a con artist. He has a real home. He has real support. And hopefully he has peace. As for me, I've started walking my dog in the mornings again. People wave now. Some stop to chat. A few still walk on eggshells around me, unsure how to undo what they said or didn't say. That's fine. I'm not bitter. I just see things more clearly now. I didn't post this story for sympathy. I didn't write it so people would flood the comments saying, "You're such a good person," or "I would have done the same thing." Because let's be honest, most people wouldn't have. Most people would have done what the neighborhood did. Hear one side, assume the worst, and join the pylon. Mob mentality doesn't need a villain, it just needs a story. And if that story is about a dying kid, people will believe whatever makes them feel like the hero for 5 seconds. But the truth is not always wrapped in a headline. It's quiet, complicated, and sometimes it's the one thing no one wants to hear. So if there's anything you take from this story, let it be this. Don't be so quick to pick up a pitchfork just because everyone else is swinging theirs. Ask questions. Wait for the facts. And if someone says no, maybe trust that they have a reason, even if they don't owe you one. Because the next time the mob comes for someone, it might be you. So, AITA for refusing to donate bone marrow? Or was I just the scapegoat for a massive con? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more crazy Reddit stories.